The president wants a Wall Street lawyer and prosecutor, not a career spy, to run all 18 of America's intelligence agencies. Senators spent hours testing whether he's up to it. Here's the hearing, then the 4 breakdown.
You have an obligation to be honest and forthright with this committee, correct?
Yes.
And is it the case in the Juan Orlando Hernandez case that the President of the United States pardoned a man who had worked with the Sinaloa cartel to facilitate massive narco-trafficking into the United States?
I don't remember the specifics of that case.
He was convicted in your district.
He was convicted.
Yeah.
We convict
Right.
a lot of people for a lot of drugs.
Convicted of narco-trafficking, yes?
I believe so.
No, so at massive scale, yes?
Well, you're telling me what I know. That's kind of, he was, I believe, look, I'll take your word for it. He was a convicted narco trafficker.
Did the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, pardon a convicted narco trafficker?
I believe we just discussed that. The president provided a pardon, yes.
Yes or no? Did the President of the
think
United States pardon a convicted narco trafficker?
Yes.
Who won the 2020 election?
I'm not going to do this with you.
This is a job interview. We've established that you have an obligation to be honest and forthright with the committee. Yes, you do have an obligation to be honest and forthright with the committee?
Yes.
Who won the 2020 election?
Like I said, I'm not going to get into that with you.
But you do have an obligation to be honest and forthright with the committee.
Is anything that I just said not honest or forthright?
Yes, you're not being honest or forthright. Who won the 2020 election?
I think I've answered the question. We can keep doing this.
Well, we're going to keep doing it because you're not being honest and forthright.
No, I'm not going to engage in the theater.
It's a simple question, Mr. Clayton.
And I've answered
Who
it.
won the 2020 presidential election?
I've answered it.
You're here asking for the support of senators to lead America's intelligence community. We've established that you have an obligation to be honest and forthright with this committee and with the American public, but you refuse to answer a simple matter of fact about the 2020 election. Is that right?
No, that's not right.
Then answer the question. Who won the 2020 election?
I have answered the question.
Answer it. What is your answer?
I've given you my answer.
What is your answer? You refuse to answer a basic question about who won a presidential election, but you asked to lead America's intelligence community? Isn't it humiliating to be unable to answer this question, to have to indulge the president's delusions? We know, you know, everybody in this room knows the truthful answer to that question. Why can you not give it?
I think I gave you the answer.
Are you aware that Director Gabbard was present at the Fulton County raid in Georgia earlier this year?
You discussed that with me yesterday in your office.
Are you aware that Director Gabbard was present at the Fulton County raid earlier this year?
You brought it to me, my attention.
What is going on here? You've said at the beginning of this you have an obligation to be honest and forthright with the committee. I'm asking a very simple question. Are you aware that Director Gabbard was present at the Fulton County raid earlier this year? Yes or no? Are you aware?
I was.
You won't answer that question either.
I just said I was made aware of it by you yesterday.
The first time you learned that Director Gabbard was present at that raid was in my office yesterday?
It was the first time that in my recollection I've thought about it recently. Now, was I aware of it before?
What?
You brought it to my attention yesterday.
Okay.
I had not thought.
So you had not known
I
until...
had not thought about it until you brought it to my attention yesterday.
Your answers lack credibility. Your testimony lacks credibility. You're being evasive and you're not being candid or forthright. And everybody across the country is going to watch this and know that. Are you aware that former Director Gabbard testified that her presence at the raid was, quote, requested by the president?
I'm not aware of that until now.
Okay, you are now aware of that.
Yeah.
Are you aware that members of this committee are already probing Director Gabbard's potential misconduct in this matter?
No, I'm not privy to your probe into.
Are you aware that the General Counsel and Deputy General Counsel of your office have already provided testimony to this committee regarding this matter?
No.
If the White House Chief of Staff or the President asks you to travel somewhere across the United States and oversee the execution of a domestic search warrant on a sensitive election facility, will you do it? Is that appropriate? Is that appropriate for the Director of National Intelligence?
That's a hypothetical.
We all know it's not appropriate.
Senator
for the
Ossoff, your
Director of
time has
National
expired.
Intelligence. Will you answer the question?
Your time has expired.
Will you give him the opportunity to answer the question? Is this not material right now, sir? Is it appropriate for the Director of National Intelligence to oversee the execution of domestic search warrants at sensitive election facilities? Yes or no?
I think you're asking me, as you just said in your first comment to me.
Yes or no, is it appropriate?
Look,
No?
you are asking me to comment on a matter that you just said was under investigation.
No, I'm asking you.
Okay, Senator Ossoff, your time is expired.
Disqualifying.
Vice Chairman.
Mr. Clayton, there's been some discussion earlier about the importance of analytical integrity, telling truth to power. The Intelligence Community Directive 203, which goes back more than a decade, says this: independent, that any information from the intelligence community should be independent of political consideration. Analytic assessments must not be distorted by nor shaped by advocacy of a particular audience, agenda, or policy viewpoint. Analytic judgments must not be influenced by the force of preference for a particular policy. You concur with that, I presume?
Yes.
So I want to ask a follow-up question to the Vice Chairman. Who won the 2020 election?
I've answered that question. I'm not going to get into that.
You have not
anymore.
answered that question. Could you answer the question? Who won the 2020 election? Pretty simple question.
Yeah, I said I'm.
So it's A or it's two,
my
two
answer.
choices.
No, I'm going to give you the same answer. The answer to the chairman was, he asked me if I was an election denier. I am not an election denier. Joe Biden was certified as
No,
the
we all know Joe
president.
Biden
He went through his process. We went through our electoral process, and I can tell you that I was in my seat at the SEC, and
I'm just
worked
asking
hard
a
for the
really
transition.
simple
So-
question. Who won the 2020 election?
as I said to you, we went through our processes, and Joe Biden became the president of the United States. And
That's not an answer to the question of who. I'm asking one more time.
Okay.
Who won the 2020
I don't, I'm
election?
not, this is like, I'm here to talk about my qualifications.
One of your qualifications is you told us you're going to tell the truth to power, and you won't answer a very simple question. Tell
I think
the truth to
I've
power.
answered it many times.
You have not answered it.
Okay.
You have not answered it. Saying Joe Biden was certified is not an answer. Okay. Why did you take it upon yourself to opine on the California election process to CNBC? You said during the interview on CNBC, you said the U.S. is doing an absolutely terrible job on election integrity, and the American people are right to question it. What's the basis of that statement? What's the evidence for that statement?
Let me give you the context of the way I look at this, because we should have this kind of candid dialogue. Elections are a process for gathering, aggregating, and providing data.
And who does the Constitution entrust the responsibility for elections?
To the states in the case we're talking about.
Correct.
To the states in the case we're talking about. But my experience at the SEC, my experience at the DOJ, my experience in the private sector is that the government processes for gathering, aggregating, and providing data need to be improved greatly.
Are you talking about elections? Or are you
I'm talking about all
are you talking about inflation data.
No, I'm talking about all government processes, including the one is.
I want some evidence, and there isn't time here in a minute and 49 seconds, but you have a lot of time between now and when we move on your nomination. I would like a written analysis from you that gives evidence of voter fraud.
I don't.
Fraud in
To be
this
clear,
country, Mr. Clayton,
to be clear, Senator,
the assertion that there's voter fraud.
I did not make that assertion. I said I said
Doing an absolutely terrible job on election integrity. What did that mean?
that meant that the audit trail that we have available for our elections in a number of places is not the kind of audit trail that you would expect in something that is this important. That's what it meant. And I mean,
So is there a problem with voter fraud in this country?
I don't think we can say definitively whether there is or is not until we have better processes.
We've had hundreds of analyses. We've had the Heritage Foundation study that found 1,650 cases out of 2 billion votes counted?
I would love for the American people to have incredible confidence in the integrity of our elections.
I would too, and I would appreciate
I'd like
it
to
if
work-
this administration would cease undermining that confidence.
I would like to work with this committee from my perspective.
Well, for
on
the record,
ensuring
I
that.
wish you would share any evidence you have that undermines that asserts that there was any problem of voter fraud significant enough to change the results of an election in this country. Following up, why was your hearing postponed? What were you told? You were going to meet with us in a few hours, and suddenly it was pulled down. Why did that happen?
I was requested and respected the request not to attend.
Were you given any reason?
I'm not going to get into the private conversations.
And you testified earlier, just to follow up briefly, you've had no involvement whatsoever with this proposed speech tomorrow night by the president. None, you haven't been consulted, discussed any involvement. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator
Mr. Clayton, according to the press reports, the FBI director spent 8 hours last Friday at the White House investigating journalists. My view is this is a flagrant attack on journalists in the First Amendment under the direction, apparently, of the Trump administration. When were you directed to issue subpoenas to the journalists, and by whom?
Senator, I believe you're referring to the reporting around the subpoenas relating to
The subpoenas you signed.
the subpoenas that I signed. Those subpoenas are in connection with an ongoing national security investigation. I'm happy to talk to you and this committee about our approach to the First Amendment and our efforts in all cases to limit, to the greatest extent possible, any intrusion into the operation of the free press. I'm absolutely committed to and respect our First Amendment and the role of the press.
So let me ask you this. It's not even clear that the subpoenas that you signed followed the administration's policy, which requires the government to first make all reasonable attempts to obtain information from other sources. What specific actions did you take before you signed the subpoenas?
I can tell you that in all of these cases, we, and not just one person, and this is the way I operate, I operate by asking my team, what do you think? Any action in this regard, you can be assured that it was a consultative exercise with the career prosecutors in my office.
So that's what you did beforehand to satisfy yourself that this was important to do, to send these journalists a subpoena and go to their house?
To issue the subpoenas, but let me say that this is, I don't want to get into this in too great a detail because it's inappropriate.
I don't want to get into details. I just want to find out what went on.
We followed the processes that
Okay.
we're required to follow.
Let me go to the question of elections. You've claimed in the past that vote by mail is tainted, and I haven't seen any evidence of this. These are your exact quotations. You talk about, dishonesty in mail-in voting, and at one point you talked specifically about a group that was doing it. I think it would be very helpful to get a sense of who you're talking about. You said, and I quote, "One group is using mail-in voting dishonestly." So you basically said you got a group out there who are election bandits. Who are we talking about?
Now, I would like to see where you're pulling those quotes from because I've been very careful in my words on this. I've been very careful. Look, election integrity. I'd like to see the whole passage.
Send you the material.
Yeah, no, it'd be great, and I'm happy to answer. But let me tell you
Please.
that we should be. There are two parts to this. One is access, which is extremely important. Access to the ballot is something that I know this body, many people have worked hard for years and years. The other one is integrity. I'm a big believer that we can have better access than we've ever had before and better integrity than we've ever had before.
All right.
And some of the constructs around our election the integrity can be greatly improved.
Well, I want to see it because I want to know the names of the people that you're calling dishonest, because I'm the nation's first senator elected by mail. The second senator was a Republican, and we don't believe that this is tainted by fraud. And I have time for one more question. You said that the country was well served by this agreement that Donald Trump is not going to get audited in terms of his taxes. You went through the whole process. Tell me if you continue to support that position, that you believe that the President of the United States should be the only person in the country who's exempt from audit.
I certainly do not believe that the President of the United States should be the only person in the country who is exempt from audit.
Do you think he should be exempt from audits? That's a yes or no question.
In terms of that specific thing, that's now a matter of litigation, and I'm not going to comment on it here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
As I said repeatedly, if you're confirmed, you've got to make sure that you speak truth to power. And that means even if the truth is not the preferred narrative that somebody wants to hear. So let me just ask you, it should be a simple question. Do you deny that Joe Biden won the 2020 election?
Senator, I'm not an election denier. Joe Biden was certified as the President of the United States.
Election denial is something that we cannot have. So I will take that as you do not deny that Joe Biden won the 2020 election.
Yeah, I'm not. I think, let me just be clear. We have substantial work to do, and I've made it in improving our electoral processes. It's part of national security, and I feel strongly about that.
One of the things that, again, this will come around perhaps to what's happening tomorrow night as well, classified information is critical. If we violate classified information, that loses us allies. It makes us less strong. I fear that certain countries already are not sharing as much information with us because of some of the things that have happened. So let me ask you some straightforward questions. If confirmed, you commit to protecting all classified information in accordance with established rules and procedures?
Yes.
If confirmed, you commit to following established processes and procedures when it comes to declassifying information?
Yes.
And that will then lead to the next, because if you're going to follow official purposes, you cannot declassify information for political purposes. Will you promise that you will not do that?
Senator, I promise that my declassification exercises will be consistent with the role, and I believe that there are a number of protections in place across the intelligence community to ensure that intelligence is not used for political purposes, and I intend to adhere to those.
Well, that is, you know, in many ways, at least for me, that is the nub of this hearing.
In preparing for this hearing, I have analyzed the procedures that are in place for declassification and other actions that you would take as the Director of National Intelligence. And I look forward to consulting with the people inside the intelligence community and at the ODNI to ensure that we adhere to those principles.
It's critically, critically important because, again, we may see some of this tomorrow night or not, but we go around those established procedures. We could burn sources and methods. We could lose allies. It is, the ramifications are so grave, and it has been treated in such a cavalier way that it's really extraordinarily upsetting to me. Along with classified information comes the analytic tool. One of the things that I pointed out in the recent IC annual survey, the number of IC analysts that are concerned that their work may be threatened by politicization, or if you don't reach the right conclusion, that completely undermines the basis of what the intelligence community is set up with. So, if confirmed, you commit that the ODNI's decisions and analysis will remain free from political pressure and conspiracy theories.
Yeah, Senator, the role is to ensure that you, the President in particular, the members of the cabinet receive the best possible intelligence product available. And I do commit to do that. And I do commit to do that.
Yeah, if you could bring the whole box a little
Sorry,
closer.
I need a space for the papers, but
I can't stress enough, if the IC workforce feels they're going to get political blowback or get fired, which we have seen, because they reach a conclusion that may not be what certain folks in the administration want to hear, that undermines the whole work of the whole community.
if I could jump in on that,
Please.
and I want to say that my experience at the SEC, my experience at the DOJ, is that the people who have worked for me have great confidence that they can speak to me in a candid and free from any worry that what they say to me in their professional capacity is going to result in any kind of disagreement. I would say any kind of friction beyond the normal toing and froing that you have in any organization.
And I will say, let me add a comment to what Senator Round said. In working with you at the SEC, I found that was how you operated, and particularly in taking on certain issues that might not have been politically popular. But this is such a different role, and I am so concerned that whoever ends up in this role is going to be under a set of pressures that may be unprecedented, and we're going to need somebody extraordinarily strong. I'll come to my last set of questions, and that is around election integrity. This job was set up to look at foreign interference in our elections. So it was more than stunning to me when the former director, Director Gabbard, showed up at a domestic, I believe, political interference activities in Fulton County. We're coming into election season. I want to make sure you are on the record. If confirmed, you will commit you will not interfere with or comment inappropriately on U.S. elections.
Senator, you outlined the role correctly. The role is to deal with foreign interference in U.S. elections, which is something I'm gravely concerned about. But that's the role.
And finally, we cannot have the DNI trying to put his or her hands on the scales in terms of tipping the outcome of any American election. Will you commit to not put those hands on the scales?
The role of the intelligence community is to provide information, not to engage in policy or those things. So, yes.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, sir. In a speech in September last year, you highlighted the great successes of the Southern District of New York, specifically calling out, and I quote, the successful prosecution of the former president of Honduras and other high-level Honduran officials for narcotics trafficking and firearms charges for partnering with some of the largest and most violent cartels in the world to distribute tons of cocaine to the United States. That correct? Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's
Fair. Now, on November 28th, 2025, President Trump issued a full and complete pardon to Juan Orlando Hernandez. Were you consulted about the pardon?
I'm not going to get into the pardon process here. The president's pardon power, I think there's only a few powers in our Constitution that are unreviewable and absolute. That's one of them. And whether it's President Biden, President Trump, or a future president, that's their power.
Are you aware of any quid pro quo regarding the pardon?
I'm not aware of any such thing.
Why
no.
would the President of the United States pardon someone that you had convicted and described as being involved in violent activities and allowing tons of cocaine to enter the United States?
Like I said, I'm not going to discuss a specific pardon thing. That's the president's pardon power.
Well, it seems to me that all the rhetoric that we've heard about fighting drugs In fact, we've killed over 200 people in the Caribbean and Pacific because they were not presidents of countries, but minor dealers in or transporters of heroin. And yet here is a king maker or a king piece who gets to walk.
Senator Reid, what I can say, and I want to be very clear, I'm not talking about the specific instance, but in our efforts to counteract the serious drug threat from south of our border, we engage with the Department of State, others, on matters of this type. It is a whole-of-government approach to this type of threat.
Thank you. Admiral Paparo, who's extraordinary commander of Indo-PACOM, indicated in testimony before the Armed Services Committee that allowing China to get access to sophisticated chips would eventually come at the expense of American service members in a conflict. So if we're giving chips to China, we're threatening or at least making it more difficult to survival our troops. President Trump, after speaking with Xi, announced a significant policy change to sell H-200 chips to China. Do you agree with the transfer of these advanced chips threatens our military security and more particularly the lives of our service members?
Senator, I'm not familiar with that particular decision, but you raise a point that I'm very proud of what my office and our partners were able to do. Chips that were sanctioned and subject to criminal sanction for being diverted to China, we brought that case.
I know, and you successfully convicted people for taking the very same chips and getting them into China. The President of the United States turns around and gives them to Xi. And the logic, I think, of your case was these chips would have been detrimental to the security of the United States. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, the logic of our case from a prosecutor's point of view was it was illegal to do it. It was a priority for the Department of Commerce, and we brought the case.
Thank you. One of the things that everyone in your business has to do is speak truth to power, and particularly when it's very uncomfortable to do that. After Operation Midnight Hammer, Lieutenant General Jeffrey Cruz of the Defense Intelligence Agency allowed his analysis to go forward, which said that it did not obliterate the atomic nuclear capacities of Iran. And he was summarily fired for speaking truth to power. It's interesting now because we're at war with Iran, and one of the principles is that they have a nuclear capacity that we didn't take out. Now, I think it appears General Cruz was truthful, and he was punished for being truthful. In your position, you're going to have to stand up to the president and say, no, you can't do that. Are you prepared to stand up?
Senator, that's a hypothetical.
No, it's not a hypothetical. It happened.
But let me just say, in my many years in public and private sector, I've given people my views in the appropriate form, in the appropriate way. I'm completely comfortable that I'll continue to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to also thank you for your comments about Lindsey Graham at the beginning of today's hearing. And we had a good discussion yesterday, Mr. Clayton, about Ukraine. I'm not going to repeat that here, but I know that his view of the situation and the view of the bipartisan support for Ukraine and the work that our intelligence community has done to support him is a really important project for all of us going forward. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Clayton, about the subpoenas of the New York Times reporters. And the reporting that I read is that the Secret Service had raised concerns about the security of President Trump's fill-in for Air Force One, and that there was a meeting at the White House with the FBI Director Kash Patel and other DOJ officials to talk about that matter, to talk about the reporting that had come from the AP. And I think earlier in an answer to Senator Wyden, you said that you had consulted with the career attorneys at the Southern District of New York. My question is whether you consulted or anybody in the Southern District of New York consulted with anybody in Washington, D.C., at the White House or the Department of Justice before those subpoenas were issued. They were issued, I think, within just hours of the reporting that struck me as somebody who has worked at DOJ as an unusually short period of time, and particularly given the equities that are at stake when journalists are subpoenaed, the equities that are at stake when law enforcement is showing up at the doorstep of journalists in this nation. I think it's very important for you to explain this in the context of this nomination.
Yeah, understood. I can't get into the specifics of an investigation, an ongoing matter. Let me say that I'm confident that the procedures that we have in place to protect the First Amendment and protect the freedom of the press and not result in intimidation of journalists or the like were followed. They depend on the facts and circumstances, how much time you have. Those matters include ones you referenced, which is, are there other available sources for the information that we seek, and have we sought that? The other aspect of this is, the tailoring of a particular subpoena and including the return date and when those people would be asked to appear or provide documents. It's expected in these types of cases, at least from mine, that if there's counsel involved, we can further tailor those requests to make it the least intrusive way possible. But let me just finish, if you don't mind. Yeah. It is vitally important that if national security interests are at stake, that there's not what I would say is a huge blind spot where someone can use the ability to provide information to journalists to get it out there, including our adversaries, without any potential for discovering how that happened.
Well, I think this committee is well aware of the intelligence equities that are at stake. We have no, that's why all of us do this work and provide this oversight. But I think all of us would agree that the First Amendment is not some sort of glaring loophole that it's out there, that it's something that we need to follow. And so I'll ask you again, Mr. Clayton, did you or anybody at the Southern District of New York have conversations with anybody at the White House or the Justice Department in Washington, D.C., before you issued those subpoenas that resulted in New York Times reporters being served process at their homes?
Yeah, I can say it this way without getting into the investigation. The protocols require consultation with the Department of Justice in Washington, and we followed the protocols.
And did anybody in Washington, D.C., suggest to you or anybody on your team that you should issue subpoenas in this case? Following the AP reporting, reporting of the president coming back on an airplane that was unsuitable for the protection and the defense of the President of the United States.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the details. What I can tell you is that we followed those procedures, and those procedures, for the reasons that I believe firmly and you believe, protecting the freedom of the press, being the least intrusive possible, require consultation.
And I would say, Mr. Chairman, I know my time is up, but the reason this is relevant to, I think, a lot of us, or certainly to me, is that this question of being able to speak truth to power, in the context of intel, I think is very similar to the question about whether or not we're able to push back in a moment like this.
Yeah, and I want to assure this committee that in these types of circumstances, that concept of least intrusive possible is front of mind for me.
Thank you, Chairman.
Let's break down a Senate confirmation hearing for one of the most powerful and least understood jobs in America, Director of National Intelligence, the DNI. The nominee was Jay Clayton, and a series of senators questioned him for hours. Underneath the back and forth were two questions that every DNI faces. Will you tell leaders the truth even when they don't want to hear it? And will you protect Americans' privacy while you keep them safe? Here's the frame. The senators who questioned the nominee pressed him hardest on two fault lines: The first is independence, whether he'll keep intelligence honest and apolitical, even under pressure from the president who appointed him. The second is privacy, whether he'll protect the constitutional rights of Americans as the government surveillance tools grow more powerful. A fair check has to weigh both. So set the two lenses side by side. The independence lens asks whether a DNI will speak uncomfortable truths to power. The privacy lens asks whether he'll guard Americans' rights as he does it. This breakdown checks each concern against the record, not the drama of a single exchange. One ground rule. Intelligence is a world of secrets, so a lot of the real substance happens where cameras can't follow. We're going to stick to what's public and checkable. The role itself, the nominee's record, the laws in question, and the specific commitments senators tried to pin down. We're judging the hearing, not the classified files. And a note on who was asking. The senators you saw pressing hardest, including the vice chairman of the committee, are among the chamber's most experienced on intelligence. That matters because confirmation hearings are one of the few moments the public gets to watch this normally invisible corner of government answer questions out loud. The tough questions are the point, not a sideshow. Start with the job itself, because you can't judge the nominee without understanding what the DNI actually does. Here's the anchor. The office was created in 2004, after the 9/11 Commission found that America's spy agencies weren't sharing what they knew. The DNI sits atop 18 separate intelligence agencies and helps steer a budget estimated at around $100 billion a year. It's less a spy and more the coordinator-in-chief of the entire intelligence community. And the DNI's single most important product is trust. Every morning, the office helps deliver the president's daily brief, the classified summary of the world's threats. If that analysis is honest, leaders make better decisions. If it's shaded to please, the whole country flies blind. So the person in this chair is, above all, supposed to be an honest broker of inconvenient facts. It helps to picture the sprawl the DNI sits on top of. The 18 agencies include the famous ones, the CIA and the NSA, but also the intelligence arms of the military branches, the FBI, and departments like State, Treasury, and Energy. Before the DNI existed, these often hoarded what they knew. The whole point of the office is to make them share, so no clue falls through the cracks the way it did before 9/11. There's also a professional standard behind all this, written down in specific. Intelligence analysis is supposed to follow rules of objectivity. Don't distort, don't cherry-pick, label your confidence, and keep policy preferences out of the assessment. Analytic integrity isn't a vague ideal. It's a documented tradecraft standard, and the DNI is its chief guardian. A lot of the hearing was really about who will enforce it. So keep that in mind as the fight unfolds. This isn't a debate between senators who want good intelligence and a nominee who doesn't. Everyone says they want an intelligence community that is both effective and honest. The real questions are about pressure and temptation. What happens when the honest answer is the unwelcome one, and who's watching the watchers? It also helps to know the recent backdrop. The top intelligence job has been unusually turbulent in recent years, with rapid turnover and public clashes over whether assessments were being shaped by politics. That history is exactly why senators pressed this nominee so hard on independence. They've watched the guardrails get tested, and they wanted commitments on the record. Which brings us to the first big fight, and the heart of the hearing, independence, or what senators kept calling speaking truth to power. Senator Angus King, a longtime voice on the committee, pushed the purest version of it. Will you tell the president something he does not want to hear? It sounds simple, but it's the whole ballgame. The value of intelligence is that it's supposed to describe the world as it is, not as any leader wishes it were. A DNI who only confirms the boss is worse than no DNI at all. The reason this isn't hypothetical is history. The most painful intelligence failures in modern memory came not from missing facts, but from analysis bending toward what leaders already believed. When everyone in the room wants a certain answer, the pressure to deliver it is enormous. The DNI is supposed to be the person willing to be unpopular in that room. There's a specific word for the danger: politicization. It doesn't usually look like a dramatic lie. It looks like softening a caveat, bearing an inconvenient finding, or quietly sidelining the analyst who won't get on board. It's subtle, cumulative, and hard to prove from the outside, which is exactly why senators wanted a leader personally committed to stopping it before it starts. Senators also probed a concrete safeguard: whether the nominee would commit to giving Congress the same honest assessments he gives the president, even when the two branches are at odds. That matters because Congress is the other customer for intelligence and the main external check. A DNI who tells the White House one thing and Congress another isn't independent. He's just picking a different boss to please. There's a personal dimension the senators kept circling, because in the end, this job runs on the character of one person. Rules and standards help, but the moment that defines a DNI usually arrives quietly, a single meeting where the honest answer is the unwelcome one. No lawyers, no cameras, just a choice. Everything in the hearing was really an attempt to predict what the nominee would do in that room. And it's worth being precise about what confirmation would and wouldn't settle. Approving the nominee wouldn't resolve the surveillance debate, wouldn't guarantee independence, and wouldn't answer the outsider question. It would simply hand one person the responsibility to get all three right. The hearing is less a verdict than the start of a long accountability that Congress and the press are supposed to keep up for years. Senator Mark Warner, the committee's vice chairman, pressed the structural version. Not just will you be honest, but will you protect the analysts below you who deliver hard news so they aren't punished for it? Independence isn't only about the person at the top, it's about whether the thousands of analysts underneath feel safe telling the truth. That's a management question as much as a moral one. Senator John Ossoff's exchange was among the sharpest, pushing the nominee on specific commitments rather than general reassurances. That's a meaningful tactic. Every nominee promises independence in the abstract. The harder question is what they'll do in a concrete scenario, when the pressure is real and the cameras are off. Pinning down specifics is how a senator turns a platitude into a promise. So weigh the independence question fairly. On one side, the nominee gave the expected assurances that he'll keep intelligence apolitical, and there's no public evidence he intends otherwise. On the other, senators are right that assurances are easy, and the real test comes later, in private, under pressure. The honest verdict is that this one can't be graded on hearing day. It's graded in office. There's a subtler point the senators were circling. A DNI serves at the pleasure of the president, who can remove him. So true independence always runs into a hard limit. The person you must sometimes contradict is also the person who can fire you. That built-in tension is not a flaw in one nominee. It's baked into the job, and it's why the personal character of whoever holds it matters so much. Senator Michael Bennet focused on the workforce and morale, the human side of independence. When career professionals believe their honest work will be twisted or punished, the best of them leave, and the quality of the nation's intelligence quietly erodes. His concern was less about a single decision and more about whether the nominee would protect the culture that makes good intelligence possible in the first place. And here's the honest complication for the critics. Wanting an independent DNI is easy to say, but every president naturally wants advisors who are loyal, and voters elected that president. So the line between healthy independence and an unelected official substituting his judgment for the elected leaders is real and contested. Most senators want independence on the facts, not on the policy, and that distinction is where the nuance lives. Now, the second big fight, carried above all by one senator who has made it his life's work, privacy and government surveillance. Senator Ron Wyden has spent years pressing the intelligence community on how its surveillance powers touch ordinary Americans. His questions weren't about whether to spy on foreign threats, which almost no one disputes. They were about the rules that decide when the government can look at the communications of Americans swept up along the way. It's a narrow-sounding issue that reaches into everyone's phone. Here's the specific law at the center of it in plain English. A surveillance authority known as Section 702 lets the government collect the communications of foreigners overseas without a warrant. That's widely accepted. The controversy is that Americans who talk to those foreigners get collected too, and agencies can then search that pool for those Americans' messages, which critics call a backdoor around the warrant requirement. Wyden's push, shared by a bipartisan set of privacy hawks, is to require a warrant before the government searches that data for an American. Supporters of the current system say a warrant requirement would slow down urgent investigations and that Section 702 has stopped real threats. Both of those claims are substantially true, which is exactly why this has been one of the hardest fights in Congress. This isn't ancient history, it comes up on a clock. Section 702 has to be renewed by Congress every few years, and each renewal becomes a showdown between security officials who want it clean and privacy advocates who want reforms attached. So a DNI isn't a bystander here. His stance can tip whether the next renewal adds real guardrails or just extends the status quo. There's also a trust problem baked into the history. Over the years, officials have given Congress assurances about surveillance that later proved incomplete, and inspectors found agencies had searched Americans' data improperly thousands of times. That track record is why senators like Wyden don't accept reassurance alone. They want rules and audits, because the system has, at times, not policed itself. And behind it all sits a secret court. Surveillance under these laws is overseen by a special court that meets behind closed doors and hears mainly the government's side. Defenders say secrecy is unavoidable for national security. Critics say a court that only hears one side is a weak check. Whatever you conclude, it's another reason the DNI's own commitment to restraint matters so much. The outside guardrails are thin. So weigh the privacy question honestly. The tool is genuinely valuable and has contributed to stopping real plots. And the civil liberties concern is genuine too. A power aimed at foreigners can quietly become a domestic search engine without the checks the Constitution normally requires. This isn't security versus paranoia, it's security versus another kind of security, the security of your rights. What Wyden wanted from the nominee was a commitment to transparency, to tell Congress and the public, in unclassified terms, how these powers are actually used. That's the reformers' core demand across administrations, because you can't have oversight of a program whose scope is secret. Whether the nominee embraces that transparency or treats it as a threat is one of the clearest tells of how he'll govern. And there's a forward-looking version of this that got attention, data the government simply buys. Increasingly, agencies can purchase location and personal data from commercial brokers, information they might once have needed a warrant to obtain. It's a fast-moving gap between old law and new technology, and it's exactly the kind of thing a modern DNI will have to decide how to handle. Threaded through both fights was a question about the nominee himself. Is a Wall Street lawyer the right person to run the spy world? Here's the fair version of the concern. Jay Clayton is an accomplished lawyer who previously ran the Securities and Exchange Commission, the market's regulator. That's serious executive experience, but it isn't intelligence experience. Critics ask whether someone without a background in spycraft and analysis can lead 18 agencies of career professionals, especially on the technical calls. And here's the fair counterpoint. The D&I job is fundamentally a management and coordination role, not a field agent role, and outsiders have run it before with mixed but real success. A strong manager who defers to career experts on tradecraft can do well. A weak one who doesn't know what he doesn't know can do harm. So the resume isn't disqualifying by itself, it just raises the stakes on judgment and humility. Senator Jack Reed, who also sits atop the Armed Services Committee, brought the conversation to the actual threats, the state rivals, the cyber attacks, the fast-moving global picture the DNI has to keep leaders ahead of. His questioning was a reminder that behind the process fights sits a genuinely dangerous world, and that the cost of getting intelligence wrong is measured in real consequences, not talking points. Reed's threat list is worth taking seriously because the DNI's inbox is genuinely global. A rising rival in China, cyber intrusions into infrastructure, the spread of advanced weapons, and now the wild card of artificial intelligence, which can supercharge both what spies can do and what adversaries can hide. Whoever holds this job has to keep leaders ahead of a picture that changes faster than any one person can track. And this is where the Senate's own role deserves a word. Confirming a nominee is one of the few hard powers Congress holds over the intelligence world, its chance to extract commitments before handing over the keys. Whether senators use that leverage to win real, specific promises or settle for reassuring generalities is itself a test of the Senate as much as the nominee. It's also worth being fair about what a confirmation hearing can and can't reveal. A skilled nominee can navigate a few hours of questions without disclosing much, and a rocky exchange doesn't always predict a bad tenure. The hearing is a job interview conducted in public, useful for testing character and commitments, but a limited window into how someone will actually perform once the doors close. So let's total it up honestly across the whole hearing. On independence, the senators' demand that intelligence stay honest and apolitical is exactly right, and the nominee's pledges are the right words, but words tested only later. On privacy, the surveillance concerns are real and bipartisan, and the answer will show in whether he embraces transparency. On qualifications, an outsider isn't disqualified, but judgment and humility will decide it. None of this tells you whether to support the nominee. You can believe intelligence must stay fiercely independent, and also believe a president deserves advisors he trusts. You can want strong surveillance against real threats, and also want a warrant before the government reads an American's messages. Those tensions aren't contradictions. They're the permanent balancing act of a free country that also wants to be a safe one. Give each side its due. The senators are right that the guardrails on honesty and privacy have been tested lately, and that pledges must be pinned down, not assumed. And the nominee's defenders are right that a president is entitled to pick his own intelligence chief, and that an outsider with strong management skills can succeed. A viewer who holds both understands this hearing better than one who only cheers a side. And notice the common ground under the sparring. Every senator and the nominee said intelligence should be honest, that real threats are real, and that Americans have rights worth protecting. The disagreement is narrow and practical: how to guarantee honesty under pressure, and where exactly to draw the surveillance line. Those are solvable questions if the will is there. It's also fair to resist two easy cynicisms. One says every nominee is a rubber stamp who'll do whatever the president wants. The other says every tough senator is just grandstanding for the cameras. Neither is quite true. Some pledges made under oath do bind behavior, and some of the sharpest questions came from senators who spent decades on this and genuinely know where the bodies are buried. The sincerity runs deeper than the theater. Here's a historical reassurance worth holding on to. The American system has, imperfectly but repeatedly, corrected intelligence abuses when they came to light, through congressional investigations, inspectors general, and a free press. The guardrails bend, and sometimes they've broken, but the machinery for catching abuse exists and has worked before. A hearing like this one is part of that machinery, doing its job in public. And a sober counterweight to that reassurance, the tools are far more powerful than they used to be. The volume of data, the reach of surveillance, and the speed of artificial intelligence mean a mistake, or a bad actor, can do more damage faster than in any prior era. So the old guardrails, built for a slower world, are being tested by technology that outruns them. That gap is the real long-term stakes. It's worth stepping back to why any of this matters to someone who never reads a spy file. The intelligence community shapes the decisions that send troops abroad, impose sanctions, or reassure allies, and its surveillance tools can touch your own phone. A DNI who gets it right keeps the country both safer and freer. One who gets it wrong can quietly cost you both. This is not an inside baseball job. So where does it leave us? With a nominee who said the right things, a set of senators right to demand more than words, and two enduring tests, honesty and privacy, that no single hearing can settle. A serious country keeps its intelligence both effective and accountable, and this hearing is a good argument for why that balance takes constant work. Watch three things from here, and the first is independence in practice. Whether, once in office, this DNI ever delivers a public assessment that cuts against what the administration wanted to hear. That single moment, if it comes, will tell you more than any hearing pledge ever could. Second, surveillance. Whether the transparency and warrant reforms that senators press for actually advance, or whether the powers keep expanding quietly while the oversight stays thin. That fight will outlast this nominee, but how he handles it sets the tone. And third, the workforce. Whether the career analysts, the people who actually produce the intelligence, stay, speak up, and feel protected, or whether the best of them quietly head for the exits. That's the least visible measure, and maybe the most important, because a hollowed-out intelligence community fails slowly and silently. Those answers will come on the record and sometimes only in hindsight. The country won't stay safe because a hearing sounded reassuring, and no right is protected by a promise alone. The work is in the follow-through, the oversight, and the quiet choices made when no camera is watching. That is where we'll keep looking. That is our breakdown. Stay with us.